Alrighty, this is the dash tab under ECU config with Ecmlink. Pretty or pretty not self-explanatory. Well, it is somewhat self-explanatory, but it's an easy tab to really go over. Basically, we're just looking at the knock CEL and coolant CEL. This is basically for knock and the coolant. These are the numbers here, let's say for 2 degrees or 216. Once we reach these numbers, whatever they may be here, that's when your check engine light is going to come on. So if it's less than these numbers, your check engine light will not come on. What I will say, easy way to tell if it's your knock one, is that usually it will come on for just a moment. You let off the gas, it goes away. So that's a pretty easy way to tell. I do see some people where they have it up real high, 6, 7, whatever, 8, whatever the case may be. I usually leave mine at 2 to start with when I'm tuning. And then when I'm usually happy with everything on my own personal car, I usually set it to 1, so that if I do at least have 1, I know that I'm looking for knock. But it depends on if you want to be warned about these parameters or not. With the coolant, basically if it hits, let's say 216, which is what I have it at right now, coolant light's or your check engine light is gonna stay on until it goes below that temperature. One thing that people tend to do is see the check engine light come on and they think they've got a check engine light. That doesn't always necessarily mean the case. You may just want to be looking at your coolant level, or your coolant temperature I should say, see what your temperature is, and if it's a high temperature, then well, you may want to see what the problem is. But basically you want to have it low enough to where you're warned in time versus letting it get way hot and either blow a head gasket or warp a head or crack a block or head or any other damage. So but if you really don't care about being warned about either of these two, you can just set them up high enough to where you're not going to see it, and that's totally up to you. So you just have to be mindful of what's going on with the engine or the or your tune. So excuse me, coolant offset. This is one that a lot of people don't really understand what it does or why you would need it or how to use it. Coolant offset, it can work on a second gen and first gen. A lot of people think that it doesn't really work on a first gen, but it does. The difference is on the second gen, you can use it to turn your fans on a little bit earlier. They will work on a first gen or second gen, or let me throw in a Galant VR4, basically anything else with a ECU from a 4G63 using Ecmlink. It'll work with that. Basically all you're doing is you're adding to whatever temperature that you have. So say right now I have 30 in here. So let's say if my coolant temperature is 20, and if I add 30 in here, well, the ECU is going to think that you're actually running 230 degrees. So you're basically just adding this number to whatever your coolant temperature actually is, and the car will make it think, or the ECU will think that that's the temperature you're running. So as far as a second gen, you're using it to maybe be able to turn on your fans sooner. On a first or second gen, you can also use it in the case where, let's say, your O2 sensor isn't going to cycle, or your trims don't go up or down because the coolant temperature is too cold and you're in an open loop. Well, let's say a first gen is a little bit worse about this than a second gen. The second gen will cycle a little bit sooner than on a first gen. But let's say if you're running let's say if you're running 90 to 100 degrees and you're not cycling, let's say you just start it up and it's cold, it may not cycle and it may stay in open loop. The ECU is looking for a closed loop situation. So let's say you're up to operating temperatures, but let's say if you run a cold thermostat, maybe you're a track only car and you want to run colder temperatures, well, you're going to want it to be in closed loop, but you're not running extreme temperatures, and you want your O2 sensor to cycle. Well, if it's, let's say you're running 140 or 150 degree temperatures, you add about 40 or 50 degrees to that, then the ECU is going to think you're operating temperatures, so it'll cycle like it should. Okay. That's a good little trick to be able to use to do that. So the thing you have to keep in mind with coolant offset is that if you get it too hot, let's say if you're running around 200 degrees and you add 40 or 50 to that, then the ECU may be wanting to pull timing because it thinks it's running too hot and it's trying to protect itself. So that's the thing you have to keep in mind, that it may think it's running too hot and pull timing. To get around that, you can go back in your timing table and add timing back in if it's doing that. So just one thing to keep in mind there. Boost gauge, pretty much self-explanatory. Basically, just one of these right here that you're wanting to log. I preferably like to either use knock or just use it as a regular stock boost gauge. However, mine in my car doesn't work, so as it should. It's kind of a sucky boost gauge anyway, so I just use knock. But option is yours there. There is a section in the wiki on Ecmlink's knowledge base for each parameters. I forget what it is right offhand, but not something I really use very often anyways, and nothing I really ever look at. That's what I'm usually looking at my logs for. But anyway, that's it on this one. Till next time.